Before I come to the studio panel, let's get the first rating, and that's coming from Dr. Bibek Debroy, member of the Niti Aayog. Dr. Debroy, what is the big message that you believe that the finance minister has sent through this budget? Is there a big message that is coming through budget 2016?
I would say that the big message that the FMA is one of fiscal consolidation, trying to use off-budget funds for leveraging investments, both public and private. And there are several reforms that are in the direction of broader financial sector reforms and plus tax reforms. But
do you say that fiscal responsibility, fiscal discipline, but do you really think the finance minister with these numbers is going to be able to stick to that fiscal deficit target?
I see absolutely no reason why not, because he stuck to it in 15-16. In fact, he bettered it on the revenue deficit in 15-16. So therefore, why should he not be able to stick to it in 16-17?
He also talks about doubling farming income in 5 years. Is this actually going to happen, or is this, as some are calling it, another election jumla at the moment?
No, I wouldn't call it that, because when one says doubling, you must realize that one is talking about doubling in nominal incomes. Now, obviously, the agricultural sector is a very broad area. It is unreasonable to expect that every farmer's income will double. But on an average, I don't really see why farm income should not double, particularly if that income comes increasingly from outside narrow, traditional crop output and moves to commercialization and diversification and value addition.
One question though, Bibek, which remains is that one criticism which I've heard in the last few hours is, where is the big idea? Where is the bold initiative that the finance minister could have taken? In that sense, it's an opportunity missed. Do you see any boldness, any risk taking in this budget at all?
Please remember that the degrees of freedom were extremely limited. The degrees of freedom were extremely limited both on expenditure and on the revenue side. And I don't think anyone within the government had said that there was going to be a bold announcement in this budget. And the budget is the only day in the year in which policy changes will be announced. So I think the bold is within quotes. And the bold expectations came from people outside the government. I'm not very sure what they were expecting. I think the only issues, a lot that was going to happen in the budget was known. I think the only issues that were not known is the degree to which the fiscal consolidation would happen and the degree to which the pay commission recommendations would be accepted.
Okay, the Bibek Debroy giving us a sense earlier on where he stands with budget 2016. Let's get your first reactions. You've had enough time now to digest the budget. Also, Naina Lal Kidwai is joining me to give us a banking perspective again, possibly. But your first reaction. Morning, you rated the budget as an 8 on 10. I have all the numbers here. Tell me, what are you going to rate it now?
I still think it's 8.
You're still giving it an 8. Okay.
With possibly an upward bias, but let's leave it at 8.
You're leaving it at an 8. Okay.
And, you know, the simple point I want to make here is that whether the suit boot ki sarkar jibe will go the way of the chai wala jibe. It so happens that this budget, and I'm sure all of us will read it and dissect it and analyze it, but my sense on reading the budget is that it does more for the poor farmer, does more for the lower middle class than any budget in memory.
Hold on. That's a very big statement to make. That this budget has done more for the farmer and more for the poor of India than any other budget in living memory.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let me just take the one little thing on the budget, if you will, give away to the lower middle class, which I count as those between 2.5 to 5 lakhs of income, the tax paying, that especially if you rent a house, your tax payment will be more than halved. That is what this budget is doing.
Okay. Let me get first reaction. Shankar, this morning, Dr. Acharya, you had given it a 5, then you went up to a 6. You've had more time to digest it. Are you going to stick to that 6? Are you lowering it, upping it, and why?
First of all, let me say, I think it's not a budget about one big idea as Vivek rightly, I think, pointed out. There's lots of little good things. I mean, not little in the sense of diminutive, but lots of things in there. Most of them, I think, are good. There are some quite bad things which I can mention at some point if you want. But on the whole, I think the good outweigh the bad. So if you're asking for a number from me, I was going to give it 7 just before, a few minutes before coming here. Then I was going through the annexures, and there's 10 pages of tinkering in the customs duties to make them more protectionist under the cap Make in India value addition incentivizing.
Okay.
And I haven't seen that in a budget speech ever.
So you're going back to a 6?
And so I'm afraid I'm sticking at 6 because of that.
Okay, so you're going back to a 6. You believe that there's been some tinkering?
No, not
a lot of tinkering.
A lot of tinkering.
And on minor issues.
No, it's not minor. I mean, if you look at any one page, you have a range between natural latex balloons being tinkered with.
So here
on
is
one
someone
hand,
who's done what, 8 budgets? You were involved
8
with
or 9, something
9
like that.
budgets, and you're giving it a 6. So that's the number I incidentally gave as a pure, not a professional economist, just the journalist in me gave it a 6. Meera Sanyal, you've been the dissenter right since the morning. Your number?
It remains at 3, Rajdeep, and I would really call
It remains at a 3. Yeah. Okay.
And
this is what happens when bankers become politicians. But go ahead. Yes.
I think it's what happens when you have a realistic assessment of it, and I'll tell you why. I think this is a budget of small things. And when we talked about a make or break here, and I do believe it's a make or break budget for India, this is an incredible opportunity for us to establish what we can do going forward. The next
Surjit Balla is saying it's been the best budget in history for the poor and for the farmer.
Well, time will tell, Rajdeep. I certainly don't think so. And when you talk about what everyone says, this is a really difficult time for India. I don't think so. You have commodity prices at an all-time low. As India goes out to build out our infrastructure, this is an enormous headwind. Oil prices are low. We have a demographic dividend. So therefore, what are the things that the government should have focused on? They should have focused on a massive apprentice scheme for skilling young people. They should have really liberalized education. They should have minimized government and maximized governance. Where are these things?
Okay, so you're saying it's a missed opportunity. I've got more voices coming in because we want to get as diverse a range of voices today as we possibly can. I'm joined by Avik Saha. He's a member of the National Coordination Committee of the Swaraj Abhiyan. They've put out a Kisan budget, an alternate Kisan budget, since this is being looked at a Kisan budget by the Prime Minister himself. Also NK Singh, senior leader of the BJP, former Revenue Secretary, is joining me. Manish Tiwari of the Congress with me, and Naina Lal Kidwai, Chairperson, Max Financial Services. If I can go to each of you to ask you to rate the budget. By the way, Meera has given a 3, Shankar Acharya 6, Surjit Balla 8. Why don't you start, Mr. Saab, since you're here in the studio, what's your number? Because here is someone who's gone as far in Surjit Balla as saying this is the best budget for the Indian farmer ever.
Speaking on behalf of the farmers, I will give it a 0. But on the other aspects...
You're going to give it a 0. Despite 84,000 crores have been put in this budget, a 48% increase in agriculture and irrigation in terms of outlays. Why give it a 0?
In your usual fairness, you will allow me time to explain.
Yes, I will.
First, I want to thank the government for the holy bakshish. 35,984 crores for agriculture and farmers' welfare. For 70 crore farmer, that comes to about 500 rupees. Thank you. We received the bakshish. Now let's look at the very long-term plan of the government in this budget, which is going to be very beneficial for the farmer. Irrigation, the quintessential issue of water. Do you know he's actually reduced 1,500 crore rupees in this budget for water? What they don't teach you when you write budgets. In 2014, the provision for irrigation was 13,500 crore. In 2016, it's 12,000 crore, not 20,000. Because read the fine print. He says the government will allocate 12,000 crore. 8,000 will come from somewhere. Private investment.
Okay, so I've got some of those numbers which even Yashwant Sinha, interestingly, is actually on the same lines as you questioning the numbers of the amount which is going to be spent, budgetary support for irrigation. But I want to go around the table. As I said, we want to bring in diverse opinions.
How much of it is state versus center? We have to be very careful.
Okay.
I don't know the numbers. But we have to be very careful about what is being spent by the state and what is being spent by the center. This is a budget of the center.
Let's go around the table to get exactly who stands by. Nainalal Kidwai, from a corporate perspective, how much are you going to rate this budget on a scale of 10? And why?
So 7 to 8, and I would do that because I was looking to see if it was a pro-growth budget, and to the extent that there's this huge investment in infrastructure, and it's happening with a good record in roads already. 85% of stalled road projects apparently already resolved, and the desire to resolve projects that are stalled along with putting money in there is very, very good. On agriculture, bringing farmers and rural demand back into the equation, the intent is good. I do think the issue between state and center is a little more confusing in terms of implementation. We will have to rely on the states, and so maybe that's a little bit of a drag. Otherwise, I would have given it an 8. I think on banks, the money in itself, the 25,000 crores, is as per the plan announced last year. I don't believe enough, but if you look at it in terms of the holistic plan, dealing with NPAs, making sure that the Sarfati Act gets refreshed, trying to bring the bankruptcy law in, allowing for the ARCs and FDI in there, it's quite holistic in terms of its approach. So I think all in all, it is a budget of many small good things when stitched together, making for a good 7.5 to my mind.
Okay, that's the difference between a banker who is not in politics and a banker in politics. A banker in politics has given it 3. A banker who is not in politics gives it a 7.5. Let me go to the two politicians then. First to you, N.K. Singh, from a government perspective. Do you believe that the finance minister has gone far enough in this budget, and what are you going to rate it? There's a feeling that he hasn't been bold enough, that he hasn't really come up with a great big idea that would actually kickstart the investment cycle, provide jobs, a lot of tinkering, particularly with taxes.
Well, very frankly, my rating would be a touch higher than the rating even of Surjit Bhalla. Wow. And this is principally for 3 reasons.
So is that a 9?
First, even under a very difficult, yes, closer to a 9, 8.75, let's say. For 3 reasons. First, Rajdeep, the reason that it is a credible balancing act between staying the course on fiscal consolidation, even when there were inescapable expenditure pressures, and not compromising on investments, particularly in infrastructure and for the rural sector. So retaining the macro fundamentals intact in a difficult year. Second, I think that the renewed emphasis on the rural sector, I entirely agree with Surjit that this is in some ways a remarkable budget which has given this emphasis for the rural economy at a time when there are serious weaknesses in the rural economy, given 2 successive failed monsoons, what it has done to improve rural infrastructure, improve the productivity of agriculture, emphasize the optimum use of water. It's not only a question of providing higher irrigation. We know that unscientific use of water leading to declining aquifers and changing the metabolic balance of the soil. So I think what it has done to that. Third, I think in terms of, apart from infrastructure which I have mentioned, a number of other measures which make a qualitative difference, not so much optically but on governance. Shankar would easily concede that, for instance, a small thing like ending this bogus classification between plan and non-plan expenditure, which had led to exceedingly poor quality of asset maintenance. That was a historical anachronism. He has ended that. He has instituted now a better and a more formal system of relationship between the Reserve Bank, which, by the way, the banks are asking for, that we would like parliamentary sanctity in terms of So a number of measures which will strengthen the institutional framework as we go forward. So for all these reasons and the fact of keeping the growth momentum going while maintaining the macro fundamentals, I have given the marking which I have.
Okay. Manish Tiwari, the Congress's reaction to it has been, and someone told me this is a UPA 3 budget. I heard this today, that this is, at least the first part of the budget was very much UPA 3, reaching out to the farm sector. Narega, for example, gets 38,000 crores allotment. There's a sense that this was an attempt at course correction, as some are calling it, by the NDA government, and yet the Congress is not happy with the budget. How are you rating it? Give me your rating first.
Well, Rajdeep, let me shift from numbers to alphabets. And I would not even give it an E for effort.
No, 1 minute. I have only numbers. I don't have alphabets with me. I have only numbers. I have numbers here. I need a number.
I think he's saying -0.
You're saying -0.
Well, what I'm saying is that I won't give it an E for effort. So let's stick with that in a binary paradigm.
Okay.
The reason why I say that Rajdeep is I am not an economist, but in my living memory, I have not been able to recall a budget which does not put a GDP number onto the next year. That's number one. Number two, there is not a whisper with regard to defense in the budget. Given the kind of security environment that we live in, there is not even a whisper with regard to defense. Number three, after 14 quarters of continuous slide insofar as exports are concerned, and exports and imports have been in the negative, there is not a single word from the finance minister as to how he is going to bolster exports. Number four, when you have 1,14,000 crores worth of NPAs in the banking sector at the last count, all that you are giving in terms of recapitalization is only 25,000 crores. And number five, there have been grandiose, grandiloquent announcements which have been made. Where are the resources going to come from? If you look at the last year, corporate income tax has not gone up. Income tax collections have not gone up. All that you have done is periodically raised excise duty, and tried to do some housekeeping. So where is the big bold idea in the budget? And if this was supposed to be the make or break budget, then it is a break budget, Rajdeep.
I wouldn't be surprised with any other reaction from the Congress. So given the fact that you are giving it an E for lack of effort, is that what he said? Yeah. An E for lack of effort, I'm presuming you're giving it a 1 or a 2 at best. So it's clear that
if you haven't even put effort, it's -0.
It's -0. But look, let me just hear from Jayant Sinha, and then I want you to respond to that, because Jayant Sinha was precisely asked this question by me, the Minister of State for Finance, that was this a course correction? Did the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister consciously believe that this was a budget where they wanted to get rid of the tag of a Soot Boot Ki Sarkar and be seen as a government that is reaching out to rural India? This is what Jayant Sinha said when I spoke to him a short while ago. How are you going to kickstart, as many are asking, the growth and investment cycle? There are people out there, viewers out there, the biggest concern remains jobs. In urban India, there's agrarian distress, which is the biggest concern. In rural India, in urban India, it is how are you going to create productive employment? What is the big idea that this budget has given, which suggests that the growth and investment cycle will actually be kickstarted, that private investment will be encouraged and jobs will be created?
Three big ideas as far as jobs are concerned, Rajdeep. Number one, what we've done for Startup India, Stand Up India, and what we've done for the startup ecosystem. A massive amount of work has been done here, and we think that our entrepreneurial, fast-growing companies are going to create lots and lots of jobs. One. Two, if you look in detail as far as the tax proposals are concerned, we have really motivated and incented Make in India. And of course, our expectation is that whether it's electronics manufacturing, civil aviation, textiles, we're going to see lots and lots of jobs coming in because of what we've done for Make in India. And number three, our FDI policies and our ease of doing business efforts are already yielding fruit in a world where FDI is actually declining, Rajdeep. FDI around the world is declining. FDI in India has grown 40%. But you can see that the ease of doing business everything we're doing in FDI is really encouraging money to flow.
So you say ease of doing business, but there are so many stalled projects. In fact, your father, Yashwant Sinha, former finance minister, writes about this, that he is worried that there is the problem of stalled projects. Now, many of these stalled projects are partly due to the crisis in the banking sector. There is a sense that maybe this budget hasn't gone far enough. Could you have gone much further in perhaps signaling the restarting, the rebooting in a sense of the Indian economy? Has this budget really rebooted the Indian economy, or have you played safe?
There is no crisis in the banking sector, Rajdeep. We have been working very closely with the Reserve Bank of India for the last year and a half to strengthen our banking sector. The fact that we have forced the recognition through the asset quality review of the NPAs is very good news, because we're working hand in hand with RBI to ensure that governance and management reforms, asset recognition, and then finally consolidation happens. This is all very good news for the banking sector. We have also strengthened the hands of the banks as far as the resolution process is concerned. I'm
going to ask you to rate your budget on a scale of 10 so that I can put it up to the viewers. I know I hope you won't give it a 10 on 10, but short of that, any number you pick and I'll put it up. What are you giving on a scale of 10?
Rajdeep, I unfortunately do have to leave, but let me just say one thing very quickly.
No, what's the number? Give me a number.
I think I'm one of the people who, the number is 8.5 out of 10 is what I would give it.
Okay, 8.5. Okay, I'm going to put an 8 and a 9, and I'm going to say 8.5 is what you've given. So you're saying 8.5. You won't give it a 10. So obviously you're still short of what you'd really have liked to give it.
8.5 is it.
Okay, 8.5 out of 10. Jayant Sinha, appreciate your joining us and telling us that you believe this is the budget which has brought Bharat and India in a sense closer together. Thanks very much for joining us here on the Make or Break Budget 2016. Why am I getting such contrasting views from an 8.5 to a 0? Now forget the politics for a moment. But
that's it. You had a higher number from NK. 8.
That's right.
75.
Yeah, but you know, despite the politics, there is a sense. Here is a farm leader or someone who's looking at farmers' issues who's saying it's not done enough for a farmer. You're saying it's the best budget for a farmer. There's someone, the finance minister says it's streamlined taxes. Someone else says it's tinkering taxes and it's actually going to create, you know, chaotic taxation, particularly with indirect taxation, if what the annexure says is true. There seem to be two very varying opinions coming on this budget. Maybe that's true of all budgets.
That is true of all budgets. Let me make 3 points. One, that is true of all budgets. Second, what Manish Tiwari said is that GDP forecast is not given. He should know there's no budget that gives you the GDP forecast. It gives you the fiscal deficit as a percent of GDP from which you derive what the GDP number is. So that is there. Third, we are democracy. This is politics. This is, you know, I imagine in China or some of the non-democratic countries, you have unanimity. Here, you will have ideology, you will have party affiliation coming in, and you're making a forecast of the goodness or badness of the budget. One last point. It is the case, I have done some, in the 2 or 3 hours that I had, calling around and asking people. And the general impression, the conclusion I derive from those conversations is that 70% approve of the budget, and of the remaining 30%, 15% are very predictable opposition types, and 15% are genuinely saying A, B, and C. So basically, you've got a 70%.
You're saying, therefore, it's probably the best budget that Mr. Jaitley has delivered out of his three. Without a shadow of doubt. For you, that's the best budget that Mr. Jaitley has delivered. Because many believe this was make or break for Mr. Jaitley. You know, there was all this talk about Raghuram Rajan possibly coming and taking over as finance minister. You believe in that sense Mr. Jaitley has at least stuck to the basics, and in your sense he's also delivered for the poor and the rural. Why is there this contrast then? Is this politics? Are the two of you and Manish Tiwari simply playing politics here at the moment by saying it's a budget which should get 0, which should get -1, or which should get just 3? Is this pure politics?
Of course.
So Rajdeep, I mean, you know, I think what Jen said was very interesting. Let's come to specifics. He says he doesn't believe the financial banking sector is under stress. This is an extraordinary statement coming from the Minister of State for Finance. The Financial Stability Report of the Reserve Bank of India itself does stress case scenarios, and they are saying that in an extreme scenario, which is quite possible given these so-called global headwinds, the capital adequacy ratio could fall below 9%. These are serious things. Now they have done things. I think Naina is absolutely right. A series of small steps have been taken. But on the one hand, a major structural reform. What's the big problem in the banking sector, which has been acknowledged in the FSA report, is simply that banks which have short-term deposits are lending project finance for long-term infrastructure. Now this is critical. Infrastructure is critical. On the other hand, you have the pension funds which are trying to create a social security system. For years we have been saying, let provident funds and pension funds invest in infrastructure projects. Bridge the asset liability mismatch. This is completely apolitical, Rajdeep. This is completely apolitical. It is a structural reform. Why don't they do it?
Similarly with agriculture. Let's look at agriculture. Here is a government which has gone out of its way. I mean, we can question outlays and outcomes. Whether the outlays will result in outcomes was a question which even the UPA government was asked. What is it that the farm sector wants that this government has not done this time? What would you have liked to see? What would you have liked to see for your 0 to become an 8?
Rajdeep, I am coming up with hard, solid numbers. These are not reactions of political nature at all. This is an excellently packaged budget which has nothing inside it for the farmer. It's a
rural roads, irrigation. Let's also, irrigation also we've got to there will be state projects as well. This is central budget for irrigation projects. Rural roads, massive injection into specific projects in rural India, dairies, crop insurance scheme, rural
unified e-market.
Unified e-market. I mean, are we saying that all this means nothing to the farmer?
Let's pick up your word massive.
Yes.
And just get on to that. The total budget has 8.5% allocation for all of this that you're talking together, the massive. So for 60% people, is this the resource allocation that a government in power would do for 60% people who voted to power?
No, let's be clear. Given the revenue constraints that the government
and what
has,
did the previous governments do? That's the important question.
You have to remember that a large chunk of expenditure, a lot of it goes on interest payments. Very large. I mean, if you add up usually interest payments, wages and salaries, and defense, you've usually done 70% of any expenditure budget. So I mean, 8.5 is pretty good.
8.5 is pretty good. So so you would also, Dr. Acharya, in your suggest that there is something to be said that this budget has gone further than most budgets in reaching out to rural India.
I would say further than most. I wouldn't go quite as historic as my friend here.
But you'd say further than most budgets. Further than most budgets.
I think it is. I think it's not just about expenditure. I think it's applied its mind in things like the unified e-market, which is conditional on the states doing their APMC laws and so on, are laying the basis for the future. Or you take the commitment to do a legislative backing to Aadhaar on the entire DBT and so on. You know, again, you might say, well, that bill has yet to come, it may not pass. Yes, of course, that's politics.
But just a minute.
And the tax dispute resolution, the taxman has got a lot less. I know. And the taxman has got a lot less authority now than he or she had before.
Can I for a moment, the Congress party in particular, is it simply that Narendra Modi has, in a sense, pulled the rug below your feet? Because you attacked him in 2014 and 15 for not doing enough for the farm sector. He goes ahead and puts, in a sense, his political capital in saying, look, I am investing in the farm sector. And the Congress says, well, you've not gone far enough. How, is this a dog in the manger attitude, Manish Tiwari, of the Congress party at the moment?
Well, Rajdeep, allow me to say 3 things. First of all, if I recall correctly, this was a government which in opposition for 5 long years rubbished the Aadhaar platform. And now, they have gone ahead and embraced it lock, stock and barrel because they realized that this is where the whole foundation of the economy or the future of the economy lies. Number 2, they rubbished Manrega for all it was worth. The Prime Minister, from platform after platform, decried Manrega. Now they've gone and embraced it lock, stock and barrel. And number three, to answer your question, you know, the Prime Minister talks about doubling farm incomes in 5 years. You know, how's it going to happen if agriculture is going to grow at 3%? And how does a farmer get income? If you raise the minimum support price, over the past 2 years, this government has done nothing, you know, in order to raise the minimum support price. So therefore, that's why I'm saying, you know, this is rhetoric. 17,000 crores to irrigate 28.5 lakh hectares of land. I mean, come on, you know, let's get real. The math doesn't add up.
Okay, let's go on before I take a break. NK Singh, it's interesting though. There is one point in what Manish Tiwari says. A lot of good, a lot of UPA ideas, not good or bad necessarily, but ideas which were rubbished by the government are being embraced. Is this a sign that the government of the day is acknowledging that perhaps it's made the transition finally from the opposition to being in power? That you realize that once in power, you can't simply junk Manrega in years of agrarian distress. You simply can't do away with Aadhaar because you've used Aadhaar now for better targeted subsidies. Will you acknowledge a Congress role at all in this?
Well, let me say this, that Congress, I think the concept of Aadhaar came even earlier than the UPA. I think at the time of the first NDA government, Mr. Vajpayee, in some form or the other, we were talking in terms. Of course, Congress gave this a tangible shape. But what it regrettably did not do is A, it stalled the implementation of the Aadhaar Act, to the great woe of Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who felt that although he had taken these far-reaching steps on the Uday program, the implementation and enactment of the Aadhaar law is something which has awaited till Mr. Jaitley announced it today. And what has he done in announcing it today? He has, Rajdeep, segregated the issue of privacy from the issue of using Aadhaar as a vehicle and a platform for delivering various kinds of schemes and programs. So exceedingly poorly implemented Aadhaar is what Congress ended up. We have restructured Aadhaar to make this a genuine platform for administration of a number of schemes and programs for rural India and for beneficiaries.
Let me, before I take a break, Naina Lal Kidwai, get a final word from you on, do you really believe that this budget will create jobs? Most believe that's the critical area. For urban India, just like for rural India, it's how do I alleviate agrarian distress. For urban India, it's about jobs. Do you believe this budget is actually going to lead private investment in a major way back into the country? Do you see a kick-starting of manufacturing at all, or is that a long-term agenda?
I fear that it may not happen in the course of the year, but it is something which kicks in as a result of investment, because the multiplier effect of infrastructure investment has to be that private sector investment goes up. Clearly our service sector is still doing all right. That's a big employment generator. And if you look at the whole food processing thrust again, which is quite critical, maybe it brings back jobs and employment into rural and farm areas as well. But jobs is a concern, and one which it isn't automatically there, because the private sector has not seen direct intervention. It hasn't seen unhappy, bad intervention in this budget, but it will have to ride on economic growth, which will come because of the investment cycle.
And
so
I'm just...
Rajdeep, I have just one area which I do want to highlight, and that is, just the whole area of implementation which lies with the states. And as we look at irrigation, agriculture, and all of these policies, however good they may be, everything is really going to finally depend on the states and how they take this forward. And I think maybe it is really about the first time, given the powers that are now being vested in the states, for us to really monitor how that happens.
In fact,
and the second thing I want to highlight, which I think is good, is the language of environment, green cess, all of that has come in. It's going to be important to make sure that the money which is levied through these cesses is actually spent in the space of environment and really looking after us in terms of pollution and some of the issues which could be such a high cost to our economy and health of our people.
In fact, from what you say, maybe next time we should focus less on the finance minister's budget and worry about what state chief ministers do. and what state finance ministers do. But it's interesting that you're saying jobs may not be created in the near term. So we're looking at the Prime Minister looking at re-election in 2019. And who knows, the investment cycle will probably turn just in time if Narendra Modi's luck holds in 2018-19. That's at least what one economist has suggested. Wait till 2018. That's when the economy will turn. Let's take a break at this point. We're going to get more political ratings, more ratings from economists. How do you rate Narendra Modi's budget? You can log on to indiatoday.com. We're rating the budget with our special panel, getting as many views as possible, a diverse range of opinion. Let's get in also the Minister for Skill Development. Remember, jobs are a critical factor for testing and rating the economy. Rajiv Pratap Rudy, who I spoke to a short while ago, and asked him the big question. Was this budget really going to be the transformative budget as was being anticipated? For example, saying that agriculture incomes will double, was that an election jumla? Listen in to what Mr. Rudy had to say.
Well, there is, I think, Rajdeep, you will have to believe the government of the day, and whatever budget is presented, this cannot be an exercise with a sound bite. It's an exercise where people have worked to see and have decided to give this budget. So I don't think it's fair to say today when you have to decide the outcome of 2022, and the indexes have to come in place. So this is whenever government on the policy level, on the financial side, takes a call and makes these decisions to do as they, whether it's for the BPL, whether it's for the health insurance scheme, whether it's for the overall capitalization of the banks, it does not happen because there is a knee-jerk reaction. It's a thought process which goes into it.
Let me get more reactions. Sachin Pilot now joining us. Also Sunil Munjal, industrialist, joining us. Appreciate both of you joining us. Sachin Pilot, you projected yourself from time to time as a farm leader. You come from a state with a large population of farmers. The question that I also put to Manish Tiwari, has Narendra Modi with this budget, in a sense, taken away the one plank that you had against this government in the last year, that it was anti-farmer? After this budget, it will be difficult for you to carry that with conviction. Would you concede that?
Rajdeep, I feel that this basically is an out and out political budget. And don't forget that the government only has 2 more budgets left before the general elections come. So this, I think, was a time where it was realization, it is a belated realization that the people of India, especially the farming community, have gone very far away from the BJP. The Bihar loss has a special imprint in this budget speech of the finance minister. So it's not just me and the Congress party, it's the entire agrarian stress that's staring the government in the face. They had to come to terms with reality. Last 2 years was all about Stand Up India, Startup India, Skill India, Swachh India, Make in India, Digital India. No outlays, no outcomes. It was all about rhetoric and speeches. And I think the fact that they have now tried to say that they are pro-farmers and pro-agriculture, but look at the numbers. How will you double the farm income in 5 years? It's just not possible. But the fact that 5 years will come after the elections, they can all very well get away with it. I think the agrarian crisis is so severe and strong that the government had to wake up. But don't forget that irrigation, for example, is a state subject. How will you make sure that the absorptive capacity of the states are in those thousands of crores that you've outlined? So it's all very well to say the budget speech starts with farmers, agrarian and rural and infrastructure, but the deliverables that you outline in the speech will not be happening with the kind of money that you've allocated. There's a Krishi surcharge. So the other class, the middle class, the tax-paying communities are going to be very, very deprived of any benefit from this budget.
You know, that's precisely part of the problem, Sunil Munjal, isn't it? The scale of the problem, whether it's with the banking sector, whether it's with the agricultural sector, whether it is with manufacturing, the scale of the problem is so great at the moment that perhaps the finance minister hasn't quite been able to actually come to grips with the scale of it all. So yes, there's a lot of right messaging, but it isn't perhaps enough. He's gone far, but not far enough is one criticism which is being given, whether on the agrarian side or whether when it comes to manufacturing.
Actually, I would differ with you a little bit here, Rajdeep. If I look at the list of recommendations that we had made from industry and from CII, almost every single one actually has been tackled in this budget speech. Whether it is to do with infrastructure, rural economy, agriculture, irrigation, making tax administration smoother, helping in dispute resolution, So you can go down the long list. He's actually addressed all of them. And obviously with the resources you have in hand, you have to allocate those resources. In fact, I was a little bit surprised when he said during the speech that he will not allow a slippage to the fiscal deficit pre-announced target. I had expected there would be a slippage. So if he's going to spend this kind of money, I've still not seen all the fine detail yet. If he's going to spend all this money, which is announced, it is actually a pretty tough balancing act that he's done by maintaining the same fiscal deficit. He has, however, of course, raised revenue from 3 or 4 places.
So are you going to rate it as an 8 or 9?
It's additional tax and dividend.
So would you rate it as some are rating it as an 8?
But I would say under the circumstances, I don't want to give a rating, Rajdeep, but I would say under the circumstances, it is actually a very well designed budget.
Very well designed budget. Sachin Pilot, you have less inhibitions about giving ratings. On a scale of 10, how much would you give it?
I think time will tell what the people of India give this budget, but I don't think it deserves more than a 2 in terms of how much benefit people are going to get, because there's no stimulus, there's no big idea. Exports are down, manufacturing is down. How are we incentivizing consumption? By raising service tax and cess and tariffs and surcharges? I think that's all working against the government's intent.
You know, how are you going to drive demand? That's another critical. You know, you need to drive the scale of the problem, Dr. Bhalla. While you've said, you know, you pointed out, you believe that he's done a lot for agriculture and the poor. The fact is, there's a feeling that you've got to stimulate consumption. The scale of the agrarian distress, according to farmer groups, is much greater than what the budget outlays are. The scale of the job crisis, 10 lakh jobs every month, 10 lakh young Indians coming into the job market, much larger than what you have. Bank crisis is much deeper than what the finance minister tells us. Do you believe that therefore he hasn't quite come to grips with the scale of the problem?
Let me come to the jobs one item in your list, which keeps coming up, and the demographic dividend and all the rest of it. It's very important. Let's just look at between 1999 and 2004, employment grew by 2.8% per annum. Over the next 10 years of UPA rule, employment grew at 0.8% per annum. The demographic dividend and the number of jobs being needed didn't just come up last year.
No, sure.
It is so.
My question is inherited.
My question
whether it's banking, whether it's jobs, whether it's agrarian, are all inherited crises.
All I'm pointing out is to say that where is he going to create? I think that's a very important thing. But somehow or the other, things will work better if some policies are followed, and that is all that I think we can ask for. Will this be better than the last 10 years?
No, I take it. Oil prices are low, commodity prices are low. I'm just wondering whether the burden has been shifted to the states. You know, this budget will eventually work or not work, provided the states also internalize the message. I think Sachin Pilot makes a good point about irrigation. You know, all these irrigation schemes ultimately are going to have to be implemented by states. Maharashtra, Congress NCP government, 75,000 crores into irrigation. It only added out 0.1% of acreage. Now, if state governments fail this budget, then the scale of the crisis, particularly given global headwinds, could be much worse than perhaps we anticipate.
Yeah, but Rajdeep, I mean, I think you have to be realistic. As one is the legacy issue.
Yes.
Whatever is the challenge today, scale, in any dimension, didn't come out in last 20 months.
It's not it's a UPA legacy.
Exactly. Now,
but you promised Achhe Din. Have Achhe Din actually come?
But forget.
Is this budget finally telling us that Achhe Din are not going to come overnight? Yes, exactly. Please wait for a while. Finally, has Narendra Modi and the finance minister told the country, please wait, it's not going to happen overnight.
Look, what I said in the morning, I think it's going to be a tough budget to make because of all the headwinds, external as well as internal, and because of the resource demands all over the place and the resource constraint. So considering that, I think it's been a very balanced attempt, barring a couple of things which I think are pretty bad.
But let's be clear, Achhe Din are not coming overnight.
They're not going to come overnight.
They're not going to come.
When was the last time we had Achhe Din in India?
No, 1 minute. In 2014, there was a feeling. I'm just wondering, and let me get Sunil Munjal on this, because I heard him a few weeks ago in Goa on this. Sunil, there was a sense in 2014 that Achhe Din are about to come. This was a T20 match. Industry believed Achhe Din. Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, he was going to fix the system. Has he finally told the country, I need time. This is a long and possibly painful process as well. I have done a course correction and please wait, give me time. Has he in a sense bought time, lowered expectations with this budget?
So Rajdeep, there are two aspects here. One is we have to realize what kind of a global economy we're in right now. And we are also a very external economy, which has happened quietly but very quickly in the last 20 or 25 years. About 41% of our economy is an external economy right now. We get severely affected with what's going on in the world. But you're also right that the scale of the problem in India is quite large. So there is no magic wand which can come and fix all our problems overnight.
Right.
Which is the reason I said that under the circumstances, this is a very well designed budget. It sets both the direction,
right.
It sets the priorities, and it also puts money behind some of the major programs.
I just have 15 seconds. I just have 15 seconds. NK Singh, can we now safely say that the government has asked us to put the pause button on Achhe Din? It's not going to happen in the next 12 months. It could happen if things go well, maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line.
Achhe Din is a process. It is not an act. There is a departure, but not an instant arrival.
Okay. I thought it was a slogan.
If you look at multiple parameters.
Okay.
Pardon?
I thought it was an election slogan. I'm glad you're saying it's a process. I'm glad.
No.
I've run completely out of time. I'm sorry, NK, to stop you. I think at the end of the day, I think this budget, in a sense, has brought the government and maybe the people of this country back to earth. I think we all have tough times ahead, and the government perhaps has recognized that and has tried to plug the holes in the critical areas. Here is someone who's rated it an 8.5. There is a 8 versus a 0. We leave it to you, the viewer, to judge this budget. Appreciate all of you joining us. Thank you very much for having these diverse range of opinions who've joined us in the studio today. I'm going to leave you with a song that we often play on Budget Day. It's a song that should worry all taxpayers at the end of the day, because you and I eventually end up paying more than perhaps we'd like to. Let's leave you with a song on Budget Day. Thanks very much for joining us. Goodbye.
3 major water plants have been shut down in Delhi, this time due to high ammonia levels. Major crisis in central and north Delhi. Aam Aadmi Party Minister Kapil Mishra is saying that the
पैसे वाले बाबू मेरा बजट बना दो, पैसे वाले बाबू मेरा बजट बना दो, बजट बना दो, बजट बना दो।